following podcast contains spoilers and words like and We watch thing. We watch thing. Hello everybody and welcome back to We Watched a Thing for another week of fun. This week we're looking at one of my favourites, and we're looking at that with one of my favourite people. It's Julio from the Contrarians. How you doing, mate?
He is back. He is back, and it's not a Wes Anderson movie.
That's right. The people are rejoicing.
Yes.
And it's not a Rennie Harlan movie either.
No, it's a completely different beast. I'm doing great, Billy. I am excited to talk to you about a movie I hadn't watched before. I didn't even know it existed until you told me about it.
You'd never seen it, and I don't know, you and I tend to have pretty similar tastes, although it's funny, I say that, but the last 3 episodes we've recorded together, we've kind of disagreed on, so I don't know why I think that. But there was something about me that was sure you would like this movie, and so I'm really curious to hear if that's the case or not. We're talking about 1991's LA Story, a satirical romantic comedy film written by and starring Steve Martin and directed by Mick Jackson. It stars Steve Martin, Victoria Tennant, Richard E. Grant, and Sarah Jessica Parker. And what is it about, Julio?
It's about... I'm trying to think of the elevator pitch. Like, how did Steve Martin pitch this movie to the studio? It's like, look, it's about... We're going to make fun of LA while telling a love story in LA.
Yeah.
So at the end, LA will be redeemed because even though it's superficial and stupid, it's still better than going to England and falling in love over there. But yeah, Steve Martin is a meteorologist who is unhappy, even though he's not even aware that he's unhappy until he meets somebody that's not from LA. The only cast member that I don't know. What's her name? Victoria Tennant?
Tennant, yeah.
A British woman. And they have a relationship throughout the movie. In the end, they get together because it was the 90s and there had to be a happy ending.
So, I need to ask this straight off the top. Was I wrong? Was I off mark? Did you like this movie?
See, it's not a simple answer. It's not as in the Wes Anderson movies where I was like, yes. I didn't hate it. I can start with that. There were some things about it that I really liked, and there were some things about it that I had issues with. So this will be an interesting conversation.
Okay.
Because I'm going to just keep like saying nice things about it, and then I'll hit you with some things I didn't really like.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
But I can definitely appreciate it. It's a movie that every now and then I would watch a movie that somebody recommends, and I was like, that was way off the mark. Why would you even think that I would like this? And now I actively had a bad time. That was not the case here. And I can totally see why you would think that I would be all over this, because we do like a lot of similar movies, and this is along the vein. Like, I think that there's some very clever dialogue here, and there's a lot of the surreal aspects of it that are a lot of fun, and I do like that kind of stuff. There are just 2 major areas of the movie that are very important and don't quite work for me, and that's, I think, where I can't just like get fully behind, but fully behind what they were trying to do. But like my co-host likes to say, like, 90 minutes. I think this is like an hour 40, maybe an hour 43, and that's with credits. So it's like it's hard to get mad about a movie that's kind of short.
Yeah, right. See, because I know that you're a writer, and I like to fancy myself a bit of a writer too, and I adore Steve Martin's writing. I think his dialogue is very strong. I love the surrealist elements in all of his films. I don't know if you've seen it, but Roxanne is another one that's kind of quite surreal in nature. And I know that you love whimsy. We're both very whimsical. We're both romantics. We're both Woody Allen fans. Sorry, I should say fans of Woody Allen's work. So yeah, okay. I'm glad that you can at least see why I might have been on the right track, even if I didn't quite hit on the head. But
yes,
should we get into it then?
Yes, let's get into it. How do you want to approach this, Billy? Seeing as how you are such a big fan, like I kind of feel like it'd probably be better if you set the stage by giving me your story, your history with this movie.
Okay,
before I just start telling you what sucks about it.
Look, honestly, I could not tell you when I first saw this movie. I couldn't do it. It's one of those movies that I've seen so many times and over such a long period of time. I must have been under 10 when I saw it for the first time. And it was probably my dad who showed it to me, is my guess. He introduced me to a lot of films that I really love, like Blues Brothers was another one and it was funny that I think even though I don't generally tend to have very similar tastes to my dad, in some ways that's where I got my sense of whimsy from. Like, I remember when he showed me Blues Brothers for the first time, and before we watched it, I was like, so what's this movie about? And he looked at me and he goes, life. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I couldn't tell you when I first saw this movie, but I was definitely already a huge Steve Martin fan and always have been, always will be. I remember seeing The Jerk and him playing You Belong to Me on the ukulele. Like, I just love him so much. And like I said, I think his style is something I really appreciate. The surrealism, the wittiness, the kind of the romantic nature of everything. Everything is romantic through the eyes of Steve Martin, and I think that comes across in this film, where LA itself is a character in this film. And like you say, it's kind of about what a crap place LA is.
It's a punchline.
But there's a very strong sentimentality and romanticism about the place as well. And I think it's that kind of stuff that comes across in his writing is what makes me love this film. But I mean, yeah, I couldn't tell you my history with it.
I'm not even born here in the States, but I'm going to show my American prudishness. It's like, you were 10 and you watched this movie that features a dual sex scene.
Yeah. I mean, I would have been watching South Park. That started in 97, so it would have been 8.
Okay, well, I mean, you were watching South Park, so I'll take it back. You were ready for it.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's the first point of contention, which is that I don't feel the romanticism when it comes to LA. I feel the other part of it, which is just the constant jabs at it, which I don't mind. Yeah. But I think that I like Steve Martin's work too. Have you gotten to Only Murders in the Building yet?
Yes, I loved that series.
So he can be so smart. And something I really like about Only Murders in the Building was that I think that there is kind of like your ground level set of jokes that you can make about podcasting. And he didn't really go there. He went like a little above that. He kept it accessible, but there was still like, the podcasting stuff was there, but it was not... I don't know, like the usual stuff that you would hear if somebody's making a joke about podcasting. So when it comes to LA Story, and of course, I have to keep in mind that this is like the early 90s, but I felt that a lot of the jokes about LA were things that
ground level.
Yeah, but I mean, it might be that they're just ground level here, like now, and maybe they were a little more, like they carried more of a sting back in the early 90s. I couldn't tell you for sure like what the context was when this movie was released, and if people were just so, they were not used to the whole like, oh well, people in LA are so superficial. I mean, imagine that's always been the case since the movie industry started there. Since they set themselves up as Hollywood. But I don't know. It's like I was like the joke, for example, like they're at this diner, right? And then the camera and the script like goes around the table with everybody making their orders, and everybody orders like a diet drink of some sort, and then everybody orders like a twist of lemon.
A twist of lemon, yeah. And
see, Martin orders like a decaf, something else, and I'm like, okay, this is funny. But I've seen a version of this joke so many times when it comes to, LA. And so, that's what I would call now in the year 2022, like a ground level.
Yeah.
And so I think that about 50% of the comedy in this movie is there, where I'm like, I can see how this is funny, but it's not funny, to me now. Like I can see how it's constructed like a joke, and then the punchline doesn't really hit me. And then, but then here's the thing, like the other half is really smart. So compare that to when Mary Lou Henner is complaining about the new British woman that just arrived, and she says, something like, "Oh, I don't like her accent," and Steve Martin is like, "Well, she's British," and she's like, "I think she's just doing that because she wants to get attention." And then he goes, "Oh yeah, like that big phony Winston Churchill." That made me laugh out loud.
I think that's one of the interesting things about coming to a movie so long after it was made, because this film celebrated its 30th anniversary last year. So,
Right.
like when you look at it through that lens, and I do, perhaps part of it is because I'm not American. Like, obviously I've heard all of those jokes about LA and stuff, but I think that they're approached with such absurdist levels in this film that, to me, it goes beyond that ground level, and it's like it's almost like when satire is so over the top that it comes back around to being more true. You know what I mean? That to me is how this film, like the scene where he's doing his performance art, going through the museum on rollerblades.
That's
and like
funny.
it's funny because it's so silly, and it's like, performance art, that's such a, LA thing. But what he's doing is so over the top that it comes back around to be true satire again. That's kind of the way I feel about this film.
I think that there are times where it's like so over the top that it works. I also like at the beginning when there's traffic's bad, and so he just gets off the the streets and he drives through the houses. So
Yeah.
that's where I think that it applies what you're saying, that it's just so over the top that it kind of comes around and becomes funny again.
Yeah.
But then there are moments where I don't feel that it goes far enough. So it just it kind of gets stuck in like first gear.
Yeah.
For example, when they're coming out of the super fancy, actually the whole thing about the fancy restaurant, right? Like they need to get a reservation. And so he tries, and when he tries, they run a credit check on him, and then he has to, he goes to a meeting in a bank with Captain Picard and a couple other guys, and they just kept going on, and I was like, but I know this. Like, I have seen this. Like, the idea of like the really exclusive place where you can't get, that was a joke that again, maybe it wasn't as played out back in the early 90s. And even then, it's going like really over the top. Actually, I think if nothing else, like the really funny thing is that later on, Richard E. Grant is able to get a reservation just like calling from a payphone. So that's funny. But actually where I was going first is that when they're coming out of that restaurant, there's like people taking photos, and then they go like, "Oh no, don't bother, it's nobody. They're not actors, they're not real celebrities." And I was like, see, I see the joke, but I've seen the joke before. Was it post 91? Probably. But it's just, it's now none of this would bother me really, or at least it's not like a big deal. But then there's the other half. And that is that Victoria Tennant, right? That's the name. Yeah. So Victoria Tennant is, I feel like she's primed to be the most interesting character in the movie because she's the outsider. So she is, she's coming from London, and she comes in, and it's just like this really weird place, LA. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just the performance or her persona, or it's just that she doesn't have enough chemistry with Steve Martin. But I didn't buy into that relationship, which is a shame because the movie wants me to buy into that relationship. There are two other women in his life, Marilu Henner, which is just a terrible person, but really entertaining to watch, and Sarah Jessica Parker, which is just luminous in this movie, even though she's pretty shallow and obviously like half his age. But if there was a character that I cared for, that was, the only person that whose feelings I really cared for, it was Sarah Jessica Parker.
I know, right?
Yeah, but she's supposed to be kind of like this side, plot that is not really meant to have a significance because you're supposed to be rooting for Steve Martin and what's her name, Sarah in the movie, to get together and work it out. And so that is the other part, because once it becomes that, I think halfway through is where he actively starts pursuing her, and they actually have a talk about potentially having a relationship. He kisses her. When that happens, I was like, oh no, the movie's going there. Did you? I don't know how it is in wherever you streamed it, but on Amazon Prime, the poster is Steve Martin and Sarah Jessica Parker. Which
really,
I know.
I've never seen that poster. No, interesting. No, so I've got this movie on Blu-ray, and the poster it's like the sun setting over LA with him. I don't know if he's like dancing or walking or something. It's almost like a silhouette.
Yeah, I've seen that.
That's the only one I've ever
on an
seen.
app too.
Yeah.
But no, the actual, like, when I rented it, was Steve Martin's Jessica Parker, which I understand that has to be like a re-release kind of thing, where once she became a big deal, they're like, okay, let's just, the second biggest star in the movie, we're gonna put her there next to Steve Martin. And so, I mean, I don't want to say that it sold me that, because I saw, for a moment the movie started, I was like, oh, she's not second billed. It's like, she's on the third screen of the credits, I think. So, but I feel like they had more chemistry and a more interesting relationship than him and Tennant. So,
it's interesting. I think I know what you're saying. It's funny, even though they absolutely should not be together. She's so much younger than him, and he's almost like a cranky old man. Like the scene where she's telling him how to spell her name, and you can tell that he thinks that's ridiculous. But and it's kind of another comment on LA and stuff. But there is a part of you that's like, oh, I want these two to end up together, because you're right, they do have such great chemistry. I think the thing for me is, at the end of the day, I'm not necessarily rooting for him and Sarah to end up together. I'm just rooting for him, I think.
He just wanted to be happy.
Yeah, I think that's what I don't even like. I think romance is obviously a huge part of this film, but I think it's deeper than just. I wouldn't call this a rom-com, for example. That's just not how I would describe this film. I think it's more about his awakening and kind of, I don't know.
I'm thinking of Sarah Jessica Parker, because I keep like fishing for like examples of like when it worked and when it didn't work for me, the LA comedy. And something that I had laughed really hard at was when she explains her relationship with her current boyfriend, who's like, oh, we can date other people. And Steve Martin's like, what, really? He's like, so where is he right now? And she points, he's like, he's there at the bar. And then there's a shot of the guy looking at them, and he's clearly not happy. He's just, and so that was funny. And I thought that was that extra punchline that elevates it, right? Because at first you're just making fun of I'm assuming the kind of like the mindset of a lot of people that live in LA. We're like, oh, we're just going to have open relationships because I'm hoping to hook up. But then you kick it up a notch by actually showing you the guy. And they do it twice, because then when they go on the road trip, she says bye to the guy and he's just watching them from the window.
So funny.
Yeah, that stuff was great. So there's the big element here of well, okay, so what's your read on the probably the biggest surreal part of it, which is the sign that talks to him? Yeah. Is that LA? Is that just a character of his own? Is that his imagination? Well, it can't be his imagination, because it actually seems to have superpowers.
Yeah.
Or maybe it isn't. Is it all in his head? Did the car really, her car really lock itself and then unlock itself and drive them to that spot so they could kiss? Or is that just how he sees it in his mind when he tells the story? But really, it was just that he took them there.
Yeah. Isn't it? I've never really thought about the street sign and whether, I mean, that's interesting. Is it kind of a, for lack of a better word, personification of LA? I never really thought of that. To me, it was just a street sign, which I know sounds dumb. Like, which I guess, because at the end you see it's like the whole network of street signs is kind of, doing this, which I guess does imply that it is LA.
That LA really fixed his love life somehow. Yeah. It's just such a weird takeaway from the movie. You know what I mean? Like, he spent so much time making fun of LA, but then at the same time also paints LA as a sentient creature that fixes his life. That it was just so, I don't know. This is me overthinking LA's story, but I just wanted to know what exactly he was trying to say about LA.
Yeah. See, that to me is part of the romanticism element of it. And I think that's something we can all relate to. Like, I'm sure that there's plenty of things that you would whinge about Austin, for example. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you live there and you've stayed there for a reason. So clearly there's things that you love about it as well. Like maybe I'm thinking too deeply about it, but to me, that's kind of a large statement of the film, is that all places have magic and beauty to them, no matter how absurd it can seem and how ridiculous your life might seem while you're living there. Like,
Yeah.
there's beauty in all of these places. Like, even LA is still, it still cares about him enough that it makes its street signs do magic for him to kind of sort his life out. Because it's not just the romantic side of it. It also, you know, he loses his job, like, which is kind of a good thing for him, you know. Like, I just, to me, that's part of.
Is it though? Because he seems pretty miserable in with his new job, or the serious reporting that he's doing later. He doesn't seem happy. I thought that we were gonna have him quit. Okay, so this is how I thought the story was gonna, for me to make sense. Okay. I'm like, he's painted LA as such a shitty place that what's going to happen is, after asking her to stay, he's going to realize that that's unfair. What he needs to do is he needs to go after her. So he's going to leave this place that he clearly hates and move somewhere else, because he realizes that whatever attachment he has to LA is kind of like a one-way street. And
Interesting.
And the sign is trying to tell him that he needs to move on. And the answer to the riddle is going to be like, you don't need to be in LA to be happy. And so he's going to go to London. She's going to fly, and she's going to fly after her. And then he's going to be happy.
It's so interesting that we read that so differently, because to me that would ruin the film. And then the only way the film would work is if then he realizes he's unhappy in London and moves back to LA. Like, that's so interesting.
Well, because I like what you're saying, that, you know, you can complain about the place you live, but then when it comes down to it, you live there for a reason. But I never got that from the movie. I never got like what does he love about LA? You know, because I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I think, I don't know. Yeah, maybe we're just reading it differently. Like I said, I read such romanticism into everything about the place. Like, and even when it takes jabs at LA, I feel like there's a sense of love there, you know, like it's kind of like when you make fun of your brother, for example, or like your best mate, you're like, oh, you're such a piece of shit. like, you know what I mean? Like, to me, that's how I feel about the whole movie, and that to me is what I take away from it anyway, is just about this beauty in ordinary things.
We referenced Woody Allen not too long ago, and I want to say it might be Hannah and Her Sisters, or there's a movie where he finds himself, I won't say he has a death wish, but he's kind of, well, surprise, he's depressed in the movie, Woody Allen. And
don't say.
Yeah, I know, but there is a sequence toward the end where he starts listing things that he likes about life, and you know, that's kind of like the turn. And I would have liked something similar.
You would have liked that turn, yeah.
Where Steve Martin just spells it out for me, and he's like, you know what, this is why you should stay. And he tells Tennant, he goes, because LA does this and this and this and this and this and this.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And also, I am here. And I'm like, all right, I buy it.
Yeah, okay.
He doesn't earn it. That's the other thing. He's kind of a piece of shit. And then he ends up, you know, like when she got on the plane, I might have written it, where I was like, I'm like, this movie gets an extra half a star if she leaves.
Yeah.
But instead, the storm happens and she just shows up. She takes it as a sign that she should be with him. And then, you know, he comes back to him and they kiss and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The indignation that he shows when he finds her hooking up with Richard E. Grant, even though he's hooking up with Sarah Jessica Parker at the exact same time. Like, this is funny, but that doesn't make you, you know, I'm not rooting for you still. Man, that scene is really funny though. They're hearing each other through the walls.
Yeah. That is funny.
Yeah.
And again, that is a joke that, I mean, we're talking 30 years. I feel like I've seen that in subsequent movies now.
Yes, that is true. But that is, I think that the humanity of that is never, you know, who cannot relate to hearing somebody having sex, you know, in the next room or whatever. That is always going to be relevant and always going to hit a nerve.
I know what you're saying about wishing that she had left. Like I said, I've never really thought of this movie as a romantic comedy. Like, to me, that's not what it's doing. It's not about the romance. So I would have been fine if she had left as well. I think that's one of those things that it was probably hard enough for him to get this movie across the line, being as absurd as it is, that selling that happy ending was probably part of the only way he could get it made.
That's true. Yeah, like they have to kiss at the end in the rain. So I really like the cast. I was, I became aware of Richard E. Grant, honestly, when he was nominated a few years ago for Can You Ever Forgive Me?
Yeah.
And then, so ever since then, every time I see him in something, I'm like, oh, it's that guy again. And so even when it's movies that I've already seen and I just didn't know who he was, like, for example, when I rewatched the last time I rewatched Coppola's Dracula, he's in it. He's one of the main characters. And so I geeked out there. And, last year, I didn't really like it, but I thought Withnail and I, that's like one of his big things. I was like, I liked him in it.
That's our mutual friend David Powell's one of his favorite films.
Yes, it is. Yes. Sadly, David, no, he knows by now. He's seen my Letterboxd review. Not my cup of tea, but they, but he's great in it, Richard E. Grant. And so here, I was like, are we going to get wacky Richard E. Grant? Or are we going to get a kind of like a toned down Richard E. Grant? And it's kind of like in between.
Yeah.
He never goes over the top, but he's good. He's funny. I bought that I like that he wasn't just this sleazy ex that's trying to take advantage of the ex-wife that doesn't want to get back to him. And instead, he actually seemed pretty hurt when she ended up saying no after everything else.
Yeah. That's one thing I really like about the film. I think as absurd as it can be and as surreal as it can be, I think that all of the characters are written in a way that they feel real. Like you were just saying about Richard E. Grant, it would be very easy for that to be a wacky character. In the same way that like the wackiest character in the film is Steve Martin, definitely. Like your protagonist is the wackiest character. Everybody else is treated very grounded. Even when they're doing silly things, you believe that that's what that character would do for some reason. And I love Sarah Jessica Parker in this film as well. I've never been a giant fan of hers, but I think she's, like you say, she lights up the screen.
Mm-hmm. This is, I looked it up. So this is, I think, 2 years before Hocus Pocus. And I had a similar experience watching Hocus Pocus where I was like, man, she's just, I'd never had that experience of watching Sarah Jessica Parker in a movie and being just so drawn to her. And so it makes sense. It was like, I think it was that time in her life. She's great. And, I called out Mara Lou Henner, and I also haven't seen her in that many things, but I thought that she was really good, really funny in just kind of a mean way. She's clearly, you're not supposed to like her. Here's another big laugh I had, which is when she confesses to Steve Martin that she's cheating on him, that she's been cheating on him for 3 years with his agent. But the way that he finds out, because she starts telling him, and he's like, well, are you sleeping with my agent? And she's like, how did you know? And he goes, I thought I was kidding. That was good, because again, that was when he said, oh, you're sleeping with my agent, I thought that he was serious. And I thought that we're getting into, we're going to make fun of the fact that LA is just so superficial that, of course, But the fact that he was not serious was what made it funny, because his shock at having actually guessed it. It was
it's not even like he was trying to trick her into admitting or anything. He was literally making a joke.
Right. But then his celebration once he's out of the apartment and he realizes that he's single now, and he's not with the agency, so he can fire his agent because he was cheating. It's just, he does this little dance. That's really funny.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you didn't hate the film.
No.
Can I ask what you thought of the score by Peter Melnick?
It was good. Yeah, it was cute. I think that there was I think it really, this sounds so pretentious. I think it really underscored the surrealism of but it's true.
I love the score for this film. I think that kind of recurring title theme, that it's so. I find it strange that a movie like this has such a memorable score in it. I adore it so much.
Yeah, it's not what comes to mind, because I hadn't thought about it until you brought it up. But then I remembered, oh yeah, that's right. Like it, because it ties it all together. It is like some movies I think are definitely musically driven, and this is not that. But you do have music that kind of like bridges things along, and it's fine. I mean, it's not. I don't know where you rank it, and you're like, where Titanic is your 10, and I don't know what else is your one, where it goes. But I wouldn't. It's like I'll remember it next time I watch the movie.
Yeah.
Because this was, by the way, so it wasn't available for rental on Amazon. You could only buy it, but it was like,
right.
Yeah, but it was a $5 purchase. So it was just like, so for the price it would cost you to rent it, you could actually own it. So now I own LA Story. so I'm gonna watch it again because now it's there in my collection.
I think you should. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on it after a second watch. Actually, I'd be really curious to hear if you enjoy parts of it more or parts of it less. This is definitely one of those things where, like I said, I've seen this so many times over such a long period. I don't know if I'd love this movie as much as I do if I was watching it for the first time today either. So,
yeah, I mean, definitely, if you watch this when you were so young and it has a connection with your dad and all that stuff, I can see how it got its claws on you pretty early on. And I don't know, I mean, because I did think when I was watching the movie, I'm like, okay, does Billy like this or does he like it more than I do because he lives in Australia, and so he's a little more removed
as well, yeah.
But I don't live in LA, and like half my life I spent in Peru, and then I guess you could say that the second half of my life I spent closer to LA. But like I've been to San Diego once, and that's kind of a different type of culture anyway. I don't know. I kind of feel like you and I have, like, our experience of LA culture has been the same in the sense that we've absorbed it through movies.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But maybe not. Maybe there is something, once you're in the States, even if you're not in California, you still can get more of it. And whereas it's a more exotic place for you. Like, I wonder what the Australian equivalent is, like an Australian movie that I would be like, this is fascinating. And you'd be like, dude, this is just, this is regular life.
I mean, honestly, most Australian movies, like anything set in one of the bigger cities, like Sydney, no one in Australia likes Sydney. People who live in Sydney is the LA of Australia for sure. That's an interesting thought, actually. Maybe next time we should watch an Australian movie.
Baz Luhrmann's Australia. Was that something that? But you hate it?
I'm not
because...
a Baz Luhrmann fan.
Oh, okay. I
don't like his style. Yeah. It is funny though. I think, and I've been reading a lot of articles and stuff lately too about why Australians hate their own accent, because Australians don't watch Australian movies because we hear the Australian accent, we're like, oh, what a fucking bogan. Even though that's how we talk, there's something about our own accent that we find really hard to appreciate. So, yeah.
I don't know if you caught it a while ago on the show. One of our dear friends, he's Australian now, our friend Chas. So he
who does the screenwriting podcast?
Yeah. He has a screenwriting podcast, and so he requests us to do this Australian movie, which is called Getting Square with Sam Worthington. Yeah,
I know of the film, but I haven't seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, so he really likes it, and we were both pretty cool on it. We didn't really connect to it, and he said that it might be just that he enjoys it because he's more steeped in the culture, and to us, we were just missing that connection. So it can work, the other way around. So I wonder if you, who right now you've owned to the fact that you kind of hate Australian cinema, if you would like that, and
I mean, there's lots of good ones. Like I do, Two Hands is an Australian
Two Hands.
classic.
Yeah, that's good. I liked it.
Have you ever seen The Rage in Placid Lake?
No.
Okay, that's one of my all-time favorite films. It's Ben Lee and Rose Byrne, and that I guess could kind of be seen as an equivalent to this, where it's kind of quirky, surreal, kind of some statements on culture and stuff and lifestyle. So yeah, I reckon you should check that one out, actually.
Okay. You're gonna have to text me that title.
Yeah. So all in all, how are you scoring LA Story then? I'm glad to hear you didn't hate it.
No, I didn't hate it. I am. See, it's weird because I finished it and I'm like, this is 6. And then talking to you, recounting all the things I liked, I'm like, no, it's a 7. I laughed a lot. I laughed out loud a lot. And I have to also factor in the fact that I watched it almost immediately after watching the French Dispatch, which I liked a lot. And so I already had that type of comedy that had been successful in my mind, and then I had to switch gears to something that was very, very different. And LA Story might have suffered a little bit because of that. So I'm gonna go with a 7. It could potentially go up. Like I said, I own it now, so it will get watched again.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I've seen this movie so many times, and it always amazes me that I still laugh out loud quite a bit, because I'm not a laugh out loud kind of person. Like, I watch a lot of comedy stuff that I think is very funny, and for the most part, I don't actively laugh out loud, but there's something about the humor in this film that really gets it for me.
I mean, you're just a Steve Martin guy.
That's true. I do love Steve Martin. Well, thank you so much for joining me and for taking the time to watch this one. Can you tell everybody about the Contrarians and where they can find you?
The Contrarians is a show where my co-host and I talk about movies that are either fresh on the tomato meter, Rotten Tomatoes, or rotten, and then we argue against that. I actually looked it up. This one is fresh. This is like in the mid-90s,
like, I think. 93 or something.
Yeah. It's fresh. So if we were doing it on the show, we would talk about it if it was a bad movie. If you think that was negative now, like, I would be really negative on it. And then on the second half of the show, we tell you how we really feel. So it's fun stuff. You can just look us up, find us on your podcatcher of choice. Just look up for the Contrarian. Look the Contrarians up, and you'll see like a little tomato look in the mirror, and that's us. Yeah,
honestly, it's such a great show. I cannot recommend it enough. And there's a reason that you've now been on the show 4 times, because you're a great person, you're a great host. It's a great show to listen to, so I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, our episodes run longer than Billy's, so we're like a bigger investment. But that's it. I didn't want to close the conversation without acknowledging something else that I found hilarious, and that might also be a comment on LA culture, but I didn't care. Yeah. The whole thing about colonics and how Sarah Jessica Parker is just really enthusiastic about enemas.
When she asks him about it, and then later on she just drags him to one. And Steve Martin is one of those hilarious people that has always seemed like an old man. You watch The Jerk, which I think that was 77 or something. So he's a young man, and already his hair is grey.
Yep.
Oh man, he's just so funny in that moment.
Yeah, that was speaking of laughing out loud, that killed me. I had to pause because it's just the way that she said it just clears your head, and he's like, they were doing it wrong.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, thank you so much. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, you can do that at wewatchedathing.com or wewatchedathing@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all under the handle @wewatchedathing. If you want to help support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/wewatchedathing, and I'll catch you next week.